Welcome to another edition of Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry. My name is Gordon Glenister. And for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm a keynote speaker, trainer and consultant in the sector and published author on influencer marketing strategy. Influence is also a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network, where you can listen to other amazing influencer and marketing related shows. But before we start, please don't forget to subscribe to the show just to make sure that you don't miss a future episode. Now, today I'm talking with Paul Cranwell, who is the VP of Partnerships at audio ad tech company Adtonos. Can you believe there are over 1 billion podcasts now? So how on earth do creators create real impact with their ads and generate real ROI? And so we discussed this and more during our session today, and I started by asking Paul what Adtonos actually do.
Yeah, so we're an ad tech company. We are a marketplace that helps to monetize for publishers. So whether you're a radio station, a music streaming, a podcast, speech, text to speech, and more recently mobile gaming. So we connect those publishers with the ad world through SSPs. SSPs being usually sort of like a hub. So we're kind of a hub that connects with a hub that then brings in all the different advertising agencies, which they traditionally call DSPs.
Yeah, and I mean the whole audio world has exploded, hasn't it? I mean, there's almost over 1 billion podcasts. We believe now, and that's probably not counting all of these independent platforms that are out there. Why do you think audio has become so popular for as a medium?
I think actually going back in time, if you think about audio is the very first communication channel to man. Whether it was grunts or whatever we had in the very beginning, speech was how we started. But interestingly, what audio has become is very much the busy person's communication channel. Yeah. So if you think about our lives now, we are under far more pressure than we've probably ever have been, whether it be personally or through work. The amount of people now that I know that are having to work and do other roles within their current job, the pressure's on. So everybody's busy, and even if they're not physically busy, they might be busy in their head. And the trouble with that is it's all clutter, isn't it? And we are bombarded by advertising constantly. So the beauty of audio is that it's something that can be consumed while you're doing something else. And to give you an example, going back, the old days, you probably remember, you think about radio. Radio is something you consume while you're cooking, you're driving, you're painting, decorating, whatever it is. But then suddenly along comes this little thing called podcasting, where people actually tend to stop, and that becomes highly engaged. Now, that's one of the rare times that actually audio becomes very much a one-on-one consumption. But everything else is around busy lives. So if you think about the amount of everything now has a voice assistant. If you buy a new car, so you buy a new Volvo now, it will invariably have 1,000 apps already installed, and you can call those up by speaking to your car. Simple as that. So it's no longer about, oh, it's nice, we've got somebody that's got a radio thing anymore. Audio is coming into our lives in a big way. It's going to transform e-commerce. It reminds us of stuff. We now have smart speakers. I have 3 Alexas, sad to say, 3 Alexas in my house. And, sometimes at first it really bothered me, but I don't know, I've kind of just accept that that's just the way of life now. But the reality is, we are now talking to devices.
Yeah, I'll tell you something really funny just on that. When I was with a friend of mine in Birmingham last year, there was a film or a series or something, and it said, Alexa, play George Benson or something. And the Alexa in our home started to play George Benson. And I thought, that's freaky. How amazing is that? So, and you do wonder when it comes to e-commerce as well, how much of our transactions are being monitored, don't you, by our online experiences. But yeah, no, I'm absolutely fascinated by audio. I mean, even in the pandemic, Paul, how many of us were, whilst we were taking our stroll, discovered podcasts and then have become habitual listeners to them? I mean, I walk around the lake when I'm in sort of Cambridgeshire, and I know I've listened to some really fascinating podcasts. And actually, as a result of two or three of them, connected with either the speaker or the guest subsequently. I thought that's a really interesting individual. So yeah, I can see how, and you've got their attention, particularly on. I mean, not always. If somebody's busy and they're cooking and something else, but if you're doing a walk, you absolutely have their attention for what could be an hour or so, or half an hour or so and that, in terms of the power of the ad, is quite phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is phenomenal. Radio listening went up anyway during COVID, because, and particularly local radio, because people want to know what's happening in their own areas. And of course, like you say, podcasts. My dad's 90. He's only just discovered podcasts. I told him, why don't you start listening to podcasts instead of trying to find movies that you like on Netflix or something like that. So it's a rapidly changing world. I mean, genuinely rapidly. We now have, talking of smart speakers, our company was the first to develop interactive audio ads. This is where we ran a campaign with Audi cars, and you could literally speak to Alexa and book a test drive or get more information sent to you. So you could literally just go, oh, hi, Alexa, yes, send me more information, or book me a test drive for that A3. And it literally would do it through your skills.
Yeah.
Now, that's just the start of many things to come, because that kind of stuff will eventually happen in podcast, will eventually happen on mobile. You're probably only talking months, not necessarily years away.
No, very interesting. So, if you're a content creator or a podcaster, how can you monetize more of your program through ad revenue, and talk us a little bit about the types of ads. I mean, I was fascinated to hear, Sonic logos and stuff like that. What's now possible? It's not just a traditional broadcast radio ad, which some of us perhaps still use, but we could be a lot more inventive with the creative.
I think this is the key. The majority of money in podcast world is made by the big brands. Yeah. You've all seen lots of headlines about various podcasters who are, whether you like them or hate them, the more celebrity they've got around them, they know the bigger the listing gets. And I think the difficulty is that anybody with, you could have a decent size audience listening to your podcast, but actually not making much money from it commercially, because first of all, who's heard of you, and are you going to get into that buy? As we've said, there's hundreds of millions of podcasts out there, so everybody's now sort of competing for that space. I think the interesting way for creators, though, is to start thinking about, if I'm going to engage with a brand, if I'm going to get in a brand to engage with me, first of all, understand who your audience is. One of the things I've always talked about in advertising is really get under the skin and understand the behavior and lifestyle of who is listening to you. Once you understand that, you can start to build a brief that's around relevance. What is it that they want or need in their lives, so that your message is going to resonate with them? Because we all have something called a reticular activator. It's our mind's radar system, and it picks up on anything that's relevant to us. So, and you've all done it. If you've ever bought a car, you've decided, oh, I fancy that new BMW. Guess what? You suddenly notice it driving every make and model like it. You will see it regardless, because your mind's already doing the work for you. If you're thinking about buying a kitchen, every TV program you see, every poster you see, you'll suddenly notice every kitchen in it. You can't help it. It's just the way it is. So it's the same with advertising. You start out with what's relevant, what's their lifestyle, what do they need in their lives. These guys are listening to podcasts because they're interested in the content. They don't want to hear adverts being chucked at them. So the beauty of podcasting is that you've suddenly got an environment that's kind of unique, whereas with radio, it's a lot more general. Yes, you might have 70% of your audience between 25 and 45 years of age with a female bias, but that doesn't tell you anything about them, because within that, they've all got different lifestyles. But with podcasts, it becomes a bit different. And so you can start to get a bit more inventive, and you can start to think about, if I'm going to run an ad, don't shout at me, don't speak too quickly. You've got an opportunity to really engage with me and almost respect me as the listener. And in doing so, you will also have content that is connected typically in some way to the content I'm running. So if I'm talking about business and finance, then the chances are you're going to have brands that are wanting to attract those people that link to it. So they've got time to be relevant and time to really sell a story and paint the picture. Some content creators will offer for increased funding. They charge extra for it, but they'll say, well, in this particular case, I'd be happy to read it as part of the podcast. So it feels like it's part of the content. So that kind of feels very what they call native. But the truth of the matter is, create and produce something that's really well done, and that will do the job just as well, if not better. You talked earlier about there's a thing called binaural ads, and this again for things like podcasts or even mobile games where people have got their headphones in. You've got an opportunity to actually do what I call it 3D ads. This is where you can create an ad that actually really paints a picture, because the beauty of audio is that if you give 1 million people an audio ad, that will create 1 million different pictures, because we all visualize in pictures, but it will all be our own experience.
Of course.
Whereas if you have a poster, you'll only have one picture.
Yeah.
So the beauty of it is you can create amazing pictures. And I was playing. There's some stuff done by the Royal Shakespeare Company recently, and also, I was asked, what about regional campaigns? Does it have to always be a massive brand? And I said, no. There's a lovely example, and I'll send this example to you for a company called City Gent Barbers up in Leeds. And literally, you can hear the cutting of the hair starting on one side of your head and moving around to the other side of the head. And then, of course, they talk about, but of course, you want the real experience, so come and see us at City Gent Barbers. So again, there's lots of ways that brands can get really smart and clever and actually paint these fabulous pictures. And by doing so, you actually then increase the value. The ad content becomes just as good as the content you were tuned into in the first place. And by doing so, guess what? I used to, a few years ago, I used to be MD of a very big specialist audio buying agency, and we used to produce podcasts. The response levels from podcasts done well go through the roof. They beat any kind of other media, genuinely. So this is where people can make money. So if you're a creator yourself or a creative agency, this is where, for a lot less than producing a video ad, you can actually probably produce something that's of a much higher caliber, higher quality, do your brand an awful lot more justice, and you can make good money at it, because actually a brand doesn't mind paying for something that's good.
Yeah, and we're going to, when we finish the editing of this podcast, we're going to include some of the snippets that you're going to send me, because we haven't done that before, actually, as a podcast. And yes, we've done some ads and I've done some readouts, but we've never done an extra clip and a sound clip. And I think that would be really fascinating to sort of see what reaction we get from our listeners. And whilst you were listening to that, I was just thinking, if you were like a champagne brand, rather than have a readout, how amazing would it be to just have the popping of the cork, so that it's almost imagining them that celebrationary purpose and reason behind buying it.
Again, that's back to knowing your audience, because if you had an audience that typically listen in the evening, for instance, So let's say you know your audience typically listening in the evening, and that they've got quite good disposable income. An ad like that would be amazing, because if they suddenly heard this and they're sort of sat there, you know, they might think, well, actually, I wouldn't mind some champagne, or I wouldn't mind some of that prosecco. And the next thing, funny enough, it sows the idea. You get your taste buds going when you hear things. You suddenly think, oh, that's why beer companies, if you think about it, spend so much time. How many times have you seen an image of on a hot day with a beautifully frosted thing, and you can see and you hear you know, that's why they do that, because it's the sound that makes it look, and then the sound, of course, then accelerates your taste buds, and then you're looking at thinking, oh, I could murder a beer now, or whatever. So
Exactly.
you're absolutely right, Gordon.
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating. And we also, when we're talking about these sonic logos, which is, I mean, we all know Netflix, for example, famous for the big red N, and it makes that sort of bong noise, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if you didn't see the stuff, but you heard it, we'd all be able to say what it was, wouldn't it? Because it's a familiar sound.
Well, imagine a scenario. You've got small kids. You've told the kids, I'm just going to do some stuff upstairs. I do not want you going onto Netflix. Yeah, you've given them very specific instruction. Then suddenly you hear the Netflix opening up because they'd forgotten to turn the sound off. You know, audio gets round corners. I mean, that's the beauty of it. So suddenly mum's going, I told you to switch that off. So the beauty of it is it's immediately identifiable. I mean, there's so many brands. I mean, you know, whether it's McDonald's or any of those, you know, regular ones. You know, look at brands like Just Eat, who've used music incredibly well.
They have.
But, you know, but you could probably sing their jingle, and I will send that to you. Netflix, I'll send to you, because again, that's a really just simple little sonic trigger. Car ads like Audi and VW and all these guys, they all use them as well. Universal Studios, look at them. They've been going forever, haven't they? It feels like as films. But what do they do? You know, immediately the film's about to start, and you get the big sonic da 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 da, and suddenly off we go. We're into it's starting.
Yeah. So I just have interest from your own experience. How many podcasts have intro music on them, would you say?
How many have intro music?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have on mine, for example, but it's been a while since I've updated it and thought about it. And, you know, suddenly having this whole conversation about sound and audio is making me think about all sorts of things, of which, you know, do we as content creators think about creating our own sound that we have had song written for us? Or do you suggest buying, buying music that's well known for your?
No, I don't. You don't necessarily need to do that. I think. I mean, if I was running my own series of podcasts, I think the first thing you need to think about is the environment. What do people like? Some people prefer a dry read. You know, some people just want it to be a discussion. Does it want to sound produced? I don't know. I think it depends on the flavor of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I think if you are, you know, for instance, if I was a celebrity podcast brand, I'd probably be looking at ways of how do I extend my brand? How do I extend my celebrity? So I'm not reliant on when the listener is in there to know it's me. Now, if that's the case, particularly where you've got people who are extending their brands, and they don't necessarily even celebrity, they might be actually selling product. They may actually talk about, you know, I've seen people doing podcasts around health products and stuff like this, and then what they might go on to do is actually say, you know, I do have a range of stuff, you don't have to use it. But again, if they were doing that kind of advertising in social media, if there was a trigger, an audio trigger they could use that was perhaps used in their podcast, then the people who were listeners, if they ever heard it somewhere, automatically they'd go, oh, I know where that's from. I know who
Yeah.
that belongs to.
Well,
So
it's even things like Mind the Gap on the tube in London. You know, I was just saying to my girlfriend a while ago, I was just thinking that'd be great if I ever was at a bar and I heard that voice, I would know it intrinsically so well,
yeah,
and I've got a visual image of the person that is saying that, and I bet you it's completely different. But yeah, it's a whole fascinating area. This.
there is also this thing of association, by the way. So
Yeah.
you've got to be careful with association. So you used a really good example there. It's like sometimes I've had advertisers saying, "Oh, what if I use this voice, or what if I use this expression, or whatever?" And the difficulty is that uh, music also helps you associate certain things. If you think about it,
Yes.
the reason sonic logos are used is that music is outside of dreams, is the only thing that actually lights up both sides of your brain, which is why you can recall things you were doing when you hear certain songs from yesteryear. Yeah. It might have been your first love, or your first day, or the first time something horrible happened, or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the fact of the matter is, music is incredibly powerful at doing that. So again, thinking through how you use it, but it's also, there can be negative connotations. So give you an example, we did some music for a window company many years ago, back in my radio career, for a company that used the Neighbours theme, and they were struggling to. Their product was very upmarket, but it was kind of
Yeah.
and yes, it was familiar. The downside was that it's actually, at the time, its audiences were middle to down market, and the association with the brand was that it wasn't. It was a run of the mill middle brand.
Right.
So we had to change it, and we worked on a whole, looked at what the lifestyle were of these people, and we found that something quite gospelly, but quite upmarket and really well sung, and actually it just changed it. And guess what? The profile of customers that shop with them changed over a couple of years. So that's just the power of association.
Of course, yeah, I can see that as well. I mean, there's some people who've got very distinctive voices, like the guy that hosts Love Island, for example. You know the guy I mean, don't you? The
Yeah,
Scottish, is it Scottish or Irish, or I can't remember, but
I can't remember his name, but
you
yeah,
know,
I know
it'd
what
be
you mean.
very,
Yeah,
very distinctive. So if you
yeah.
would have him on there, people would recognize his voice instantly, but they would align it with Love Island.
Where do they exactly? And
Yeah,
so if it's not a young, that kind of audience type profile, is that the association you want? And I think
correct, correct.
these are the things. So there's a lot of thought goes into it, and good creatives know this,
Yeah.
and are very good at sort of steering it in the right way, should we say?
I mean,
Yeah.
how long should an ad last, typically, in your opinion, if you were posting it in a podcast?
Um, no longer than it needs to tell the story. Less is more usually, because one of the big mistakes is anybody doing the ads for themselves always say too much. And
Yeah.
this is about, you can't bore your audience into submission.
No.
So what you're going to be careful of is, how can I do this in a as quick and entertaining way and engaging way as possible? There is no absolutes. So sometimes a 60-second ad will be the right thing to do. For instance, in things like mobile gaming, what we're finding is shorter ads, 20 to 30 seconds max, is about right. And that's to do with the fact that they're actually playing a game while they're doing it, but then they hear the ad. So they don't want something that's droning on and on and on. So we're finding actually often good impact, quick call to action, get in there, but do it well. Just do it really well.
Do it well.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Whereas with a podcast, you have the luxury of taking it out, but make sure it's good, because if it's 60 seconds of a typical radio ad, you're probably going to say, I don't like it. One of the biggest complaints people have of popular podcasts is that sometimes there's too many ads.
Yeah.
And that's because what they're really saying is, there's too many ads that aren't relevant to me.
Yeah, and absolutely right. And where would they normally, in your opinion, where do you think they should sit? Pre-roll, i.e., at the start of the podcast, in the middle, or at the end?
So pre or mid, doesn't really matter. I think you've got to think about what it is you're doing in your podcast. Also, the technology of advertising. If it's being inserted programmatically, then for sometimes it's easier to just run a pre-roll, because then at least you can just get into the flow. But pre or mid, look, not every best will in the world, Gordon. Not everybody's going to listen to your podcast to the end. That's the truth of the matter. So I wouldn't want my ad at the end, because there's a good percentage not going to hear it. So I think I would say pre or mid is preferable.
Good. Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I really enjoyed it. Actually, it got my little senses wondering about what we could do even within this show. And I think we're going to add some of these clips in so our listeners can listen to them. How can people find out about how to get in touch with you?
So I'm, LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn, Paul Cranwell. You'll find me. Look at the company, Ad Tonos. I'm on there. I'm not hard to find. There's not too many Paul Cranwells on the planet, so I think that'll be fine. I've been in the audio industry for 30 odd years, and I've seen the changes and lived through them, and seen the difference it makes to people's lives. And I genuinely believe that I don't think there's any better time to be in audio right now. It's one of the most exciting channels, communication channels, and it's really going places. You're going to see a lot more change and exciting things coming.
Yeah, I can't wait, actually. Lovely to see you, Paul, and thanks again for taking your time out to speak to us on the Influence Global podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks, Gordon.
City Gent, hair fashion for men, bring you their first ever virtual haircut. Put your headphones in now for the full experience.
Yeah, I can take quite a bit of weight from this side if you want.
Here's your Brewdog IPA.
This virtual version sounds pretty good, but it's no substitute for the real thing. So book an appointment at City Gent, Ball Lane Leeds and Otley Road in Headingley. Save yourself 25% by quoting Air25 in store.
That's it for another edition of Influence. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give me your feedback at gordon@gordonglenister.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, where you can also ask me a question. If you're able to give us a 5-star review, we really do appreciate that as well. If you want help in creating an influencer marketing strategy, or you want to join the Influencer Marketing Roundtable weekly event, please just head over to gordonglenister.com. And then again, if you want to find out about our shows and many others, head over to the MPN, which is the Marketing Podcast Network website. Thanks as always to my producer Neil Whiteside from Freedom One. And until next time, from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.